My dudes, my little spinnakers. Spinnaker is a sail with 3 corners. It sounds offensive, like calling people that, but it's really not an offensive term. It's just based off the consonants. It sounds offensive. How's it going? Good to see you, people I can't see at the moment. Hope to see you after COVID, assuming we don't die. I'm not here to get depressing, though. What I'm here to do today, I'm going to talk about video games. Yeah, what a nice change of pace, right? Going, from political philosophy and philosophical intricacies to let's talk about video games. Talking about Bioshock, the original game, and how it's a blatant critique on Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, and it criticizes the concept of objectivism, and it truly displays why anarcho capitalism truly can't work. What do you know? I haven't delved that far. So, 2 things. 1, I'm not getting into spoiler territory with this video. Bioshock is well renowned for having one of the best stories in video games and having one of the most intricate plot twists seen in any media. It's been out for 13 years, but it is that good where it's not even a credible argument being able to say, well, it's been out for a long time, you should know the story. No, if you haven't experienced Bioshock, either watch a playthrough with no commentary or experience the game yourself and really invest yourself into the world and the concepts that it explores, as well as the story that it's amazing. When I do get into spoiler territory, it's going to be on a separate YouTube channel called All Day the Geek Way. Doesn't really roll off the tongue. If you have any better names, let me know. But, point being, I'm not getting into spoiler territory with this. Second, I did write notes for once. That being said, that doesn't change anything about these videos. I'm still partially going to go off the cuff because it turns out, as I did more research, I had a lot more to write. And as I had a lot more to write, it became more difficult to organize everything. But Jarrett, why don't you just take the time and have a separate sheet of paper that's a little bit more organized so that way you can have proper transitions and structure into your video? It's because shut up. That's why. So, let's get to the subject. Bioshock is a blatant critique on Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. It rejects the notion of objectivism, showing its true flaws and how its intricacies can't actually work. And it displays why anarcho-capitalism truly cannot be a successful society. So let's get into it. If you know anything about Bioshock, it centers around the dystopian world. It's the underwater city that's a dystopian area called Rapture, where the individual is meant to thrive. There's no government. There's no one being dictated by religion. It's supposed to be the most free society to ever exist. In concept. Notice the word dystopian. Could have been a utopia. It wasn't. Now, within the game, you start off as the main character, Jack. Your plane crashes, you're in front of a lighthouse. That's the closest bit of land, so you walk up the lighthouse, go through a door, and the first thing that you see when the lights go on is a bust of the head of Andrew Ryan, looking down on you. Andrew Ryan is the main antagonist of this series that you're going to encounter throughout the game. Now, Andrew Ryan is a direct representation of Ayn Rand. Andrew Ryan is the one who created the city of Rapture, this utopia that practices objectivism. What is objectivism, though? That's a big question. Well, a basic synopsis of objectivism is it states one should work toward personal happiness first, and happiness of others is secondary. So it's a concept of self-interests over the interests of others. Without the intervention of the state, society, in concept, is supposed to rule itself. This will get deeper into anarcho-capitalism, but let's save that for a little bit. Now, Andrew Ryan, the main antagonist of the series that you will encounter. As I said, objectivism is supposed to thrive off the individual. In concept, you should be able to see people equally. But when you go in that lighthouse, and it's depicted as Andrew Ryan looking down on you. It's supposed to be superior, more powerful, and here are the labels that say, no gods, no kings, only man. Now, why do I also say that Andrew Ryan's a direct representation of Ayn Rand? Putting it blatantly, look at his initials. Andrew Ryan, A-R, Ayn Rand. Her name's spelled A-Y-N, first name, last name is going to be R-A-N-D. A-R. This isn't a coincidence. How is it a critique of Atlas Shrugged, you asked? Maybe you didn't ask, but now you're going to, because I want you to. Well, there's going to be many times throughout the game where you see statues or portraits or pictures of Atlas carrying the entire world on his shoulders. Not only that, but the first person that comes to your aid, you never meet him, but the first person that you hear from goes by the alias of Atlas. This is not a coincidence, by the way. But let's get back to Andrew Ryan. He is the antagonist to you in the series, though if you look into the backstory, I'm sure he had noble intentions, but even with those noble intentions come consequences, if not executed correctly. And as we're getting to, it won't be executed correctly. Andrew Ryan built the city of Rapture after the Second World War, when he noticed that the atomic bomb was used as quote-unquote corrupt science. That the corruption was inevitable as power grows. So as a display of power, the United States bombed Japan with 2 of its nuclear bombs, and he saw that as a source of corruption. Well, as you go through the game, the first thing you do is go into a bathysphere, going underwater, deep, deep down into the depths. And Andrew Ryan's talking about the city of Rapture. You get to see it for the first time. It looks glorious, too. It is one hell of an introduction to a gameplay area or a city. It's not open world, mind you. It's pretty linear in terms of levels, but it looks beautiful. Even to this day. After the remaster, too, it looks even better. This is part of how he describes Rapture. Ryan claims that Rapture... Excuse me for a moment. Rapture... Well, for one, it's a city built in his image. So that's a problem, because he, as an individual, has dictated how his city is supposed to be built and what it's supposed to accomplish. Well, doesn't that automatically insinuate that the individuals that come into his city are restricted by his rules? Kind of ironic there. Though Andrew Ryan describes Rapture as a city, or quote, the city where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small. Now let's look at that for a moment. I'm going to be exploring some of these concepts a little bit later. Now personally, I'm in agreement that artists shouldn't be censored. To an extent. When I say that, so if you look at the Soviet Union, and when art wasn't made for profit, you notice there was a lot more freedom in the artwork that was being expressed within the Soviet Union. That's one of the praises I can give the Soviet Union. But what happens when the individualism of someone impedes on someone else? What if artwork takes an immoral turn and it hurts people, literally? That's a concept that this game explores in one of my favorite levels with one of my favorite characters. The scientist isn't bound by petty morality. Morality being petty. Interesting. You know who else wasn't bound by petty morality? I know every argument somehow leads back to the Nazis, but let's talk about the Nazis. I don't know if you heard about this thing that happened in history. I know some people reject it. I call them idiots. But it's this time where this thing called the Holocaust happened, where millions upon millions of people died. 6 million Jews alone. Jewish people, excuse me. And Nazi scientists perform very immoral experiments on people. So, I mean, that's a problem in itself when you can make that correlation. And then, where the powerful were not constrained by the small. Well, this brings into question is, can the individuals of the small truly thrive? And who are the great? Who are the powerful? Is it the people that can figure out how to build a rocket ship into space? Or is it the ones that can throw the spear the furthest? Well, within Ayn Rand philosophy, it tends to lean toward those who can throw the sphere the furthest. Now, I have many problems with objectivism and anarcho capitalism. Aside from it being rejected from academia, but it's a concept that a lot of conservatives and libertarians look toward, which isn't inherently bad in itself, but it's a matter of looking at the implementation. And this is what Bioshock explores. So Andrew Ryan builds this city in his image. Automatically, there's a huge power disparity between the bourgeois and the proletariat, where it's the respected and the few that can thrive. But I thought in an anarcho-capitalist society, technically everyone, technically speaking, should be able to thrive. But it's the individuals who have the best ideas and who introduce, the best things. They're the ones who are going to thrive. It has nothing to do with monopolizing people and going with societal trends and actually dictating how those societal trends work. Let's not get into that. Anyway, you get into Rapture. And Rapture is a totally dystopian society. Things have gone to shit. You're introduced with that first thing. You're introduced to murder first thing. Like, things have gone pretty nuts. And you don't know what happened. You're just introduced to this. You're just introduced to a city that's gone to ruins. Now, what I love about Bioshock, and I love storytelling like this, is the storytelling is put within, like, if you play Dark Souls and you pick up items, they have storytelling within the descriptions. Well, in Bioshock, they have audio logs that depict things that have happened in the past. You put those things together, and then you figure out why things have gone the way they have now. So you know that Andrew Ryan came to power, and you also hear about another character, Frank Fontaine. The infamous Frank Fontaine. Another one who rose to prominence within his city. Now, I mean, to be fair, Frank Fontaine was going with the objectivist mindset, I guess. I mean, but the issue was, he used to be part of a mob. He was a grifter, a smuggler, but he knew how to manipulate the means and manipulate the masses. And that scared Andrew Ryan. Within his city, where the individual is supposed to prosper, right? Like, what's the big deal? Well, here's another concept that Bioshock gets into. What happens when power and control are challenged? This is a big one. Well, with Andrew Ryan, he takes big watch of Frank Fontaine. This is all within the audio logs, by the way. So this is not not spoilers within the main game, just to clarify. But Ryan takes note of Frank Fontaine, saying, quote, "This Fontaine fellow is someone to watch. Once he was just a menace, to be convicted and hung. But he always manages to be where the evidence isn't. He's the most dangerous type of hoodlum. The kind with vision." Oh, well, what kind of vision could that be? other than building yourself into prominence and effectively creating your own government. Now, to clarify with Andrew Ryan, he has Ryan Industries. Just so happens Frank Fontaine opens an industry called Fontaine Futuristics. But, you got to know about some of the rules with Andrew Ryan, with his city, the city that he built in his image, the way that he wants it. It's that, Andrew Ryan, you're allowed to do whatever you want in Rapture, essentially, within his guidelines. But you're not allowed to import goods, because he didn't want the outside world to discover Rapture and inevitably get their hands on the city. Well, that kind of restricts individualism, but that can also be taken advantage within a black market. And Fontaine smuggled items in. And as that happens, you'll learn about these sea slugs that carry what they call Atom. Now, these are essentially stem cells, but they can be used as stem cells, But Atom has the properties to be able to entirely reconfigure a genetic code. So in the genetic level, you can splice your genes to be whatever you want in your own image. But you'll notice that a lot of enemies that you go against are called splicers. And it's said in the game that through the discovery of Atom inevitably brought the fall of Rapture. But keep in mind, people who have played the game, who makes that quote? Who says it? And also, there's two things about Bioshock that you need to understand. It goes into the concept of constants and variables. Now, with Atom's discovery, there would inevitably be a downfall within the power of Frank Fontaine and Andrew Ryan. The reason, though, is the constant. Atom is always going to be discovered by Rapture. It's always going to be prominent within the city of Rapture. The variables are what Atom is used for. Now, is it used to cure cancer and cure people of disease? Which, in theory, it can do. No, it's exploited. It's exploited by Frank Fontaine. And Ryan takes note of that, actually. Andrew Ryan says, something must be done about Fontaine. While I was buying buildings and fish futures, he was cornering the market on genotypes and nucleotide sequences. Rapture is transforming before my eyes. The great chain is pulling away from me. Perhaps it's time to give it a tug. Oh, so free marketplace of ideas, right? Free marketplace, and suddenly Andrew Ryan's losing power to Frank Fontaine. And he references the Great Chain. Now, usually the Great Chain is in reference to the Great Chain of Being, which is a hierarchical structure within religions. But in this case, it's going to be with man and the natural power structures within man and who controls the power and what happens when that power is challenged. Well, who does it affect? Well, you hear audio logs of people who are below Andrew Ryan, still successful somewhat in their own way, but they are restricted by their vision. So truly, people don't get to have their own vision within Rapture. They are stuck with Ryan or Fontaine's vision, depending on the circumstances. So for instance, one of the proprietors to make the Little Sisters within Bioshock, if you don't know what that means, just look it up, was a woman named Tannenbaum. Tannenbaum was a scientist in Germany who I believe was in the concentration camps during the Holocaust. But she became really well renowned as a geneticist and scientist. And to do more research, she tried to go by the legitimate means of Andrew Ryan, but ultimately she resorted to Frank Fontaine and his smuggling business. Which, was inevitably going to happen. Though, that being said, you hear an audio log from Frank Fontaine being like, that Tannenbaum, that broad, she came to me, And, you have to make her feel nice. You give her the basic supplies, and then he basically says, I'm reaping the benefits of the small things I give her for her research. I get the benefits of it. Further showing Fontaine's prominence into power. Well, things change in Rapture with the discovery of Adam. People become more obsessed with it. They want to change their genetic code. They want to have more plastic surgery. They want to change things about themselves that they couldn't before. But also, people want to perform experiments that they couldn't do before. So you have a man named Steinman. He's one of the first bosses that you encounter in the game who's obsessed with symmetry and claims to have met Aphrodite. And he says, so he's a cosmetic surgeon, but he says, with Adam as my scalpel, I have been transformed. But is there not something better? What if now it's not my skill that fails me, but my imagination? So now he's taking an obsession with Adam. An obsession that, frankly, Frank Fontaine can take advantage of. And as Rapture changes, there's one voice of reason that I've heard throughout the audio logs, who's named Bill McDonough, or however you say his last name. And one of the audio logs that he has is saying, quote, Rapture's changing, but Ryan can't see the wolves in the woods. This Fontaine fellow, he's a crook and a proper tea leaf. But he's got the atom, and that makes him the governor. He's sinking the profits back into bigger and better plasmids, building them Fontaine poorhouses, more like Fontaine recruiting centers. Before we know it, bloke's going to have an army of splicers, and we're going to have ourselves a whole heap of miseries. Man, as someone who is objective looking in at Rapture, was he right? Oh, also, poorhouses can be referred to as a workhouse that is government-run, or in this case, Fontaine-run, facility to provide housing for the dependent or needy. Poorhouses. Let's explore that. Fontaine built poorhouses, which in turn became Fontaine recruiting houses. Notice the power disparity between the proletariat and the bourgeois, or the powerful and the workers, and how Frank Fontaine was able to manipulate people to work for him, have him gain more profits, but at one point would have his own private army, just like Ryan did. This is foreshadowing, by the way. And this man, who I just quoted, Bill McDonald, I should have learned his last name before I said anything. He saw what was going on. He could see inevitably what was going to happen. And he even says something to Andrew Ryan, saying, so this guy is the general contractor to Andrew Ryan. He says, Mr. Ryan, I believe in Rapture, but that doesn't mean we always win. Fontaine Futuristics is the biggest thing going in Rapture, so let me be plain. When we arrest that toe rag Fontaine for his thieving and smuggling, we must make it clear that we won't touch his business interests. We sit on the council because these poor sods trust us, not because God gave us a chair. What an interesting concept. I love that. Because it shows that Fontaine knew how to exploit what the proletariat and the basic workers and the societal trends. Adam became a societal trend. And Fontaine knew this. And he took advantage of it, and that's why he rose into prominence. Can you correlate that with any modern day corporations? Amazon, Disney. Those are just two. Like, you can name others. And how they rose to prominence and how they raised to power. And Fontaine raises to power, and Ryan's challenged by it. He, as an individual, isn't happy. His happiness comes from having power and control in a city that has the individual thrive. But Bill McDonough, he sees this. He sees this. He knows who it's going to affect. Well, as far as I know, he knows. And it always affects the workers. There's a huge power disparity within an anarcho-capitalist society, especially when things are being run specifically by profit. Hey, here's an example. So, if you have an underwater city, you somehow need a supply of oxygen. Well, there's a character named Julie Langford. She is an arborist in Rapture. She figures out a way for everyone to be able to survive and be supplied oxygen within the city of Rapture. She does this successfully, but doesn't stop there. The place that the trees and the plants where they thrive is in a place called Arcadia. And it can be seen, you see one of the advertisements, it's a vacation spot. So, it's more than just survival, it's profit. Tourism is profit. And what a better place to go to than Arcadia. And Langford points out this inconsistency in saying, like, we're supplying everyone. And Ryan basically says, well, should a farmer not be rewarded for the fruits of his labor? And Langford actually has an argument against that, but inevitably, because she works for Andrew Ryan, she shuts up because, quote, he pays her. He's the one who supplies the paychecks. That was paraphrasing, but I'll get it next time. Andrew Ryan's the one that pays her. He has the say in everything. There's no one controlling Ryan. He's just challenged by power. But everyone under him has no say. They could be fired at any point. He gets to set up the wages. He's the one who gets to have things go in his image. Though it doesn't stop there. These are people who have a little bit higher power within these industries, but even then, they're not of prominence. It's Andrew Ryan or it's Frank Fontaine. They're the top ones. Well, let's look at the bottom. Let's look at the proletariat. You'll find audio logs from a character named Peach Wilkins. He is a representation of the proletariat, speaking out of desperation. And let me find it. One of the audio logs that you find, Peach Wilkins, a worker, he's comparing his status to that of Andrew Ryan. Remember the Great Chain that I mentioned? This one being the Great Chain of Man? Peach Wilkins sees how these chains are. Ryan's Great Chain's gold, while, quote-unquote, ours being, quote, the sort with the big iron ball around our ankles, or around your ankle, is what he says. And he talks about Andrew Ryan with his financial success and his power, being able to go to Fort Frolic to bang models while Peach Wilkins is stuck taking the guts out of fish. Peach Wilkins worked for Andrew Ryan. But even then, Peach couldn't come to prominence. So what does he do? He starts smuggling for Frank Fontaine, because Frank Fontaine has more to offer. So the proletariat becomes desperate. Frank Fontaine looks really good compared to Andrew Ryan. Andrew Ryan's in charge of Rapture, in his city of being so free. Everyone has equal opportunity, even when they don't. Everyone is free to do what they want, but people get desperate. Those people, truly, as a proletariat, they're so restricted that they have to seek their own freedom by legal or illegal means. In this case, working for Fontaine, so that they can progress themselves. So in an anarcho-capitalist society, can freedom truly exist? For the small? Absolutely not. It's the wealthy and the powerful who are in charge. Not everyone can thrive in an anarcho-capitalist society. There's different circumstances. I can get into the socioeconomic impacts of stuff like this. I can get super semantical, but this is going on 30 minutes as it is, so bear with me. But Peach Wilkins gets desperate. Well, inevitably what happens is Andrew Ryan wants to have Frank Fontaine executed. But these two having amassed their own private armies, go to war. They literally go to war within the city of Rapture. And ultimately, Fontaine loses the war. So now Andrew Ryan's in charge. But this being said, you're not going to satisfy everyone within this anarcho-capitalist and objectivist society. A man named Atlas, a man who represents the proletariat, rises up. And there's a giant proletariat movement within the city of Rapture as the city goes further into shit. Ryan is going against Atlas now, because Atlas represents the masses, while he represents the small, while Andrew Ryan represents the few and the powerful. Now, if I go much further, I'm going to go a little bit further, actually. There's multiple levels throughout the game, and my favorite level is called Fort Frolic. I think it's one of the best constructed levels in video games, not to mention with the most compelling storytelling, not to mention it has my favorite character in the entire Bioshock franchise, Sander Cohen. So, the power disparity is you have Andrew Ryan, you have Frank Fontaine, and then you have people that are not working for them necessarily, but they're not prominent as much as those two in Rapture. Well, you have Fort Frolic. It's where the artist can be free. Well, when the war broke out between Frank Fontaine and Andrew Ryan, this is one of the points where Sander Cohen, who's insane, by the way, play the game and you'll understand, and makes them actually a little bit more compelling. And I apologize for the noise in the background. I'm not editing this video. I need to get a new computer and editing software, stuff like this. Fort Frolic, when the war breaks out, he, quote, closes it to the public. This results in the loss of jobs. You know, artists can't do their jobs in Fort Frolic and being able to thrive since everything is closed. And also everyone is locked in Fort Frolic. And they are meant to achieve Sander Cohen's art. His art is pretty morbid. But, you know, the artist isn't restricted by the censor. So I know this video was a little bit long. I can go way more into it. Though, basically, as I said before, Bioshock is a huge critique on anarcho-capitalism and objectivism. It shows why Ayn Rand's philosophy is inherently flawed, and it's only the powerful that thrive in an anarcho-capitalist society. And when that power is challenged, the powerful become desperate. And as a result, the few are the ones, or excuse me, not the few, the small, quote-unquote, the proletariat are the ones who are truly effective. The proletariat can never truly achieve a higher elevation of status, and as a result, they are going to be stuck in poverty. And when they try to challenge that power, they are subjected to the power that claims those individuals can thrive. It's quite ironic. Bioshock's one hell of a game. Take the time to play it. It goes really deep into these philosophies. I know I focused more on the game, but I hope you can correlate the gameplay, and not just the gameplay, but the story that I'm talking about, correlate it with objectivism and correlate it with anarcho-capitalism and how power dynamics and control, when those are challenged, cause desperation. And truly, objectivism cannot work in the libertarian sense, where there's no regulation. When things are unregulated, things become more chaotic. Things aren't going to regulate themselves, especially when the power is prominent. Anyway, y'all, hope you enjoyed the video. I know it was a little bit off the cuff. Let me know what you think. Give me your insights, and we'll go from there. In the meantime, see ya.